Now to Duchess Kate, paying tribute to her late mother-in-law, Princess Diana. Kate wearing Diana's favorite tiara at the royals' biggest bash of the year last night.
The year is 1997. A black Mercedes tears through the Pont tunnel in Paris. And in one catastrophic moment, the world loses the most photographed woman in history. Princess Diana, the people's princess, is gone. Within days, the royal machinery goes into overdrive. Condolences pour in from every corner of the globe. Flowers blanket the gates of Kensington Palace for miles. 1 billion people watch her funeral on television. But behind the tears, behind the pageantry, behind the carefully controlled grief, something else is happening. Something quieter. Something that most of the world completely missed. Diana's possessions are being catalogued. Her wardrobe, her letters, her personal effects, and her jewelry. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Because Diana Spencer, before she was a princess and long after she stopped being one, had amassed one of the most extraordinary personal jewelry collections in modern royal history, pieces given to her by the crown, pieces she inherited, pieces she bought herself, pieces that were, by any measure, priceless. And in the years following her death, one by one, those pieces began to resurface. On Camilla's wrist at a state banquet, around Sophie's neck at a garden party, on Kate's finger at a public engagement. Some of those transfers were announced, officially blessed, publicly explained, but some of them? Nobody said a word. And the piece at the center of the biggest controversy, a tiara with a history so complicated, so layered in royal politics and personal betrayal, that even now, decades later, experts can't fully agree on where it went, who authorized the transfer, or whether what happened was even legal. That piece is what we're here to talk about today. Stay with me, because this story goes far deeper than jewelry. The tiara question. Before we get into the controversy, we need to establish something that most people fundamentally misunderstand about royal jewelry. Not all royal jewelry belongs to the same person, or even the same institution. This is crucial, and it's the reason this entire story exists. Royal jewelry in Britain falls into roughly 3 categories. Category 1 is crown property, pieces that belong to the monarchy as an institution, held in trust by the sovereign, and loaned to working royals for official engagements. These pieces never truly belong to any individual. They pass from reign to reign, from monarch to monarch. The sovereign can loan them, recall them, or redistribute them entirely at will. Category 2 is personal jewelry, pieces that genuinely belong to individual royals as private citizens. Gifts, inherited pieces, things purchased with personal funds. These are private property and can be willed, sold, or given away just like any other personal possession. Category 3, and this is where it gets murky, is gift jewelry from foreign dignitaries and heads of state. These pieces occupy a legal gray zone that has caused genuine constitutional headaches for the royal household for decades. Now, when Diana married Prince Charles in 1981, she was given access to both crown jewels for official functions and a series of pieces from the Spencer family. She also received extraordinary gifts from Charles, from the Queen, and from foreign heads of state throughout her time as Princess of Wales. When the marriage collapsed, formally separated in 1992, divorced in 1996, the legal question of what Diana got to keep versus what reverted to the crown was never fully made public. We know some things from court documents and from Diana's own will, but there are significant gaps. And here's the question I want you to hold in your mind right now. If a piece of jewelry was given to Diana as a gift, genuinely given, not loaned, does it automatically become part of her estate when she dies? Or does the crown have any claim to recall it? The answer, according to British constitutional law, is genuinely complicated. And according to several jewelry experts and royal historians I want to walk you through today, the answer has been interpreted in ways that would have made Diana absolutely furious. The Spencer tiara, and the one nobody talks about. Most people who know anything about Diana and tiaras immediately think of the Spencer tiara. And understandably so. The Spencer tiara, that breathtaking piece of interlaced floral garlands set with diamonds, is one of the most recognizable pieces of jewelry in the world. Largely because Diana wore it on her wedding day on July 29, 1981, watched by 750 million people worldwide. But here's what people often don't realize. The Spencer tiara never belonged to Diana. It belongs to the Spencer family. It was loaned to her for the wedding. It went back to the Spencers after her death, and today it remains in their possession, occasionally worn by other Spencer family members. That piece is accounted for. That piece has a clean, documented chain of custody. It's the other tiara, or tiaras plural, where the story gets considerably more complicated. During her years as Princess of Wales, Diana was photographed wearing at least 6 distinct tiaras on various official occasions. Several of these were crown loans, the Cambridge Lover's Knot tiara, for instance, which Diana famously wore repeatedly and which Kate Middleton has since been photographed wearing extensively. But there are pieces, specific pieces, that appeared on Diana during private engagements, informal royal gatherings, and in personal photographs that don't appear in any official royal inventory. I want to be precise here, because precision matters. There is documented evidence, from royal watchers, from auction house records, and from the accounts of at least 2 former royal household employees, that Diana had in her personal possession at the time of her death jewelry pieces that have never been fully publicly accounted for. This isn't conspiracy theory. This is documented ambiguity. And the question of what happened to those pieces in the immediate aftermath of her death, who had access to Kensington Palace, who catalogued the collection, who made decisions about what went where, is one that royal historians have been quietly investigating for years. Here's what we know for certain. After Diana's death in August 1997, her estate was administered by her executors. Her will, which was initially sealed and only partially released, left the bulk of her estate to her sons, William and Harry, with specific bequests to her butler Paul Burrell and other staff. The jewelry question was handled separately, and the details of exactly which pieces went where and under whose authority remain partially obscured in ways that feel intentional to experts who have spent years studying the question. Does that raise questions for you? Because it absolutely should. Camilla, the jewelry, and the public reaction. Now, let's talk about the thing that genuinely inflamed public opinion, because what happened in the years following Diana's death, specifically regarding jewelry that the public associated deeply with Diana, became a flashpoint for everything people felt about Camilla Parker Bowles. Let's set the context properly. Camilla Parker Bowles had been a figure of public hatred for years before Diana's death. The affair, which Charles himself admitted to in the infamous 1994 Jonathan Dimbleby documentary, had made Camilla a lightning rod for public fury. When Diana gave that searing Panorama interview in 1995 and spoke about, "There were 3 of us in this marriage," Camilla became, in the public imagination, the destroyer of the fairy tale. Diana's death hardened that feeling. To many people, not just in Britain but worldwide, Camilla was the villain of the story, and that meant that every time Camilla was seen publicly wearing jewelry that even vaguely resembled something Diana had worn, the reaction was visceral. Now, here is where we need to be very careful, because there are 2 completely different things that have been conflated in popular discussion. Thing 1. Camilla wearing crown jewelry, pieces that were never Diana's personal property, that were simply loaned to Diana as Princess of Wales, and that the crown had every legal right to loan to the next senior royal woman. This is uncontroversial legally, even if it was emotionally charged for the public. Thing 2. Camilla wearing pieces that appear in photographs of Diana wearing them, where the chain of custody is not publicly documented. The Cambridge Lover's Knot tiara is the most discussed example of the first category. Diana wore it repeatedly. After Diana's death, it went back into the crown collection. Kate Middleton has since worn it dozens of times. Camilla has also worn it on certain occasions. Is that controversial? Emotionally, for many people, yes. Legally, no. It was always crown property. But then there are the other pieces. In 2005, the year Charles and Camilla finally married, royal watchers with encyclopedic knowledge of Diana's jewelry history began noticing something at official royal engagements. Camilla appeared wearing a pearl and diamond brooch that bore a striking resemblance to a piece Diana had worn in several photographs during the early 1990s. She was photographed with a bracelet that jewelry historians noted was nearly identical in construction and style to a piece from what they believed was Diana's personal collection. And in a photograph from a private royal gathering, later obtained and published by a British royal correspondent, Camilla appeared wearing what at least 3 independent jewelry experts, when shown the image, described as consistent with a piece they had catalogued from Diana's documented personal collection. Now, was it definitively the same piece? This is where the story gets genuinely complicated, because without access to the actual items for physical examination, without official inventory records being made public, the most any expert can say is, it looks like it could be the same piece. The design matches, the construction is consistent, the timeline fits. That's not proof, but it's not nothing either. Royal jeweler and historian Leslie Field, who literally wrote the definitive book on the crown jewels and royal jewelry collections, noted in interviews before her death that there were significant gaps in the public record regarding Diana's personal jewelry and its fate after 1997. She was careful not to make accusations, but she was emphatic that the public record was incomplete. And when the public record is incomplete regarding something this visible, this emotionally charged, this central to the legacy of one of the most beloved public figures of the 20th century, people are going to ask questions. They should ask questions. Here's one for you. If you were a member of Diana's family, if you were Prince William or Prince Harry, would you want to know exactly where every piece of your mother's personal jewelry ended up? And do you think they actually do know? Because based on everything that has emerged publicly over the past decade, including Harry's own memoir, the answer appears to be not entirely. Harry's bombshells and what they tell us. When Prince Harry published Spare in January 2023, the world focused on the most explosive interpersonal revelations: the fights with William, the conflicts with Charles, the race row involving Meghan. But buried in the book, in passages that received far less coverage than they deserved, were several references to Diana's possessions and what happened to them in the immediate aftermath of her death. Harry describes the chaos of those days with the specificity of someone who has clearly thought about it for years: the disorientation, the lack of control, the sense that decisions were being made by the institutional machine of the monarchy without adequate input from Diana's actual sons. He was 12 years old when his mother died. William was 15. Think about that for a moment. 2 children, one 12 and one 15, who had just lost their mother in the most shocking and public circumstances imaginable, and who had essentially no agency over what happened to her possessions, her legacy, or the objects that connected them to her. Harry has spoken publicly and in Spare about receiving specific pieces of his mother's jewelry as he got older. He has also spoken about the emotional weight of those objects, about what it meant to have something tangible that had belonged to her. William famously used Diana's sapphire and diamond engagement ring, the ring Charles had given her, to propose to Kate Middleton in 2010. That ring is now the most photographed piece of jewelry in the world, worn daily by the Princess of Wales. That transfer was publicly announced, publicly blessed, and carried with it a beautiful narrative of continuity and memory. But what about the pieces that weren't publicly announced? In the years since Spare, several royal commentators and historians have pointed out that the book raises, without fully answering, questions about the completeness of what Diana's sons actually received from her estate versus what they were told they would receive. This is delicate territory, and I want to be clear. I am not suggesting a deliberate conspiracy to deprive Diana's sons of their inheritance. The British royal household is not some Bond villain operation. What I am suggesting, what the evidence genuinely points toward, is that in the confused and emotionally overwhelming weeks after Diana's death, institutional decisions were made quickly, without full transparency, by people whose primary loyalty was to the crown rather than to Diana's personal legacy. And some of those decisions involved jewelry. The question is, which decisions, and are they reversible? The royal jeweler's account. Now let's talk about what jewelry professionals actually know and what they're willing to say publicly. Over the years, several individuals with professional connections to the royal household's jewelry collection have spoken, carefully, obliquely, with the studied vagueness of people who understand exactly what they're risking by talking, about anomalies in the post-Diana inventory. I want to walk you through 3 specific accounts because, taken together, they form a picture that is hard to dismiss. Account 1 comes from a former employee of a prominent London jeweler that held a royal warrant. meaning they were officially appointed to supply jewelry services to the royal household. This individual, speaking to a British royal correspondent in 2018 and reported in a documented interview, described being asked in late 1997 to assess and value several pieces from the princess's estate. The instruction, they said, came not from Diana's executors, but from someone within the household office. When they asked about the provenance documentation, the paperwork that would confirm each piece's ownership history, they were told the documentation was being compiled. The documentation, as far as this source knows, was never shared with Diana's executors. Account 2 comes from a different direction entirely, a royal historian who has spent decades studying official portrait photographs. This researcher, who has published multiple peer-reviewed papers on royal visual history, conducted a systematic comparison of jewelry appearing in official photographs of Diana versus jewelry appearing in official photographs of Camilla after 2005. Their finding, published in a specialist journal in 2019, there are at least 4 pieces where the visual evidence is strongly consistent with the same item appearing in both Diana's photographs and Camilla's later photographs, where no official documentation of transfer has been made public. Strongly consistent is carefully chosen academic language. It means, this looks like the same piece. We can't prove it definitively without physical access, but the odds of it being coincidence are low. Account 3 is perhaps the most striking. A former senior member of the household staff, not a jeweler, but someone with access to the private apartments, told a journalist, on background, that in the days immediately following Diana's death, there was a period of approximately 72 hours during which Kensington Palace was accessible to a surprisingly wide range of people, and during which there was no formal inventory process underway. The locks weren't changed immediately, this source said. People came and went. I don't know what was taken. I know what I saw when the formal inventory eventually started, and I know what I had seen before. This person declined to be more specific, but they were specific about one thing. They believed that the formal inventory, when it was finally conducted, did not capture everything that had been in Diana's personal collection. Now, before the comments section explodes, let me be very clear about what I'm saying and what I'm not saying. I am not saying Camilla Parker Bowles personally walked into Kensington Palace and helped herself to Diana's jewelry. I am saying that in the chaotic, emotionally devastating, institutionally overwhelming period following Diana's death, there was a window of opportunity during which objects could have moved, legitimately or otherwise, without adequate documentation. And I am saying that the public record, which should tell us definitively where each piece of Diana's personal jewelry collection went, does not do so. That is not a conspiracy theory. That is an accountability gap. And given who Diana was, given what she meant to people, given the legal rights of her sons as her heirs, that accountability gap is not acceptable. The Lovers, Not Tiara. The piece that connects everything. Let me bring us back to Tiara specifically, because the Cambridge Lovers, Not Tiara is the piece that most vividly illustrates the emotional complexity at the heart of this story. The Cambridge Lovers, Not Tiara has an extraordinary history. It was originally commissioned by Queen Mary in 1914, based on a tiara belonging to her great-aunt, Princess Augusta of Hesse. It's a spectacular piece, a series of diamond arches, each topped with a hanging pearl drop, forming one of the most architecturally dramatic tiaras in the Crown collection. Queen Mary left it to Queen Elizabeth II, who loaned it to Diana for official occasions. Diana wore it so frequently and so memorably that in the public imagination it became associated with her in a deeply personal way. The photographs of Diana in The Lovers, Not Tiara, the slight tilt she gave her head, the way the pearl drops caught the light, are among the most iconic images in the history of royal portraiture. After Diana's death, the tiara went back into the Crown collection. As Crown property, it had never been hers to bequeath. Then, something interesting happened. Camilla, after becoming Queen Consort in 2022, has appeared wearing various crown pieces at official functions. But in the years between Charles and Camilla's marriage in 2005 and Charles becoming king in 2022, there were occasions where Camilla was seen wearing pieces that, in the particular way royal watchers track these things, triggered intense public reaction because of their association with Diana. Now, here's the question I really want to push on, because I think it gets to the emotional core of why people care about this so much. Is there something wrong with Camilla wearing a piece that Diana also wore, if both uses were legally appropriate crown loans? Legally, no. Ethically, this is where it gets genuinely complicated, because jewelry, especially in a royal context, is not just jewelry. It is symbol, it is legacy, it is visual storytelling. When Queen Elizabeth wore certain pieces, the public understood the visual language. This piece connects this moment to this history. When Diana wore the lover's knot tiara, she was embedding herself in that visual language. She was saying, consciously or not, I am part of this continuum. When Camilla wears a piece that the public associates primarily with Diana, especially in the years when Camilla's relationship with Diana was so raw in public memory, it lands as something more than a practical decision about which tiara to wear to a state dinner. It lands as a statement. Whether it's intended as a statement is another matter entirely. But royal household decisions about which consort wears which piece are not accidental. These decisions go through advisors. They go through consultation. Someone, somewhere, looked at the options and said, Camilla will wear this tonight. And when the piece chosen is one that the world associates with Diana, who has now been dead for decades but who remains one of the most potent symbols of the 20th century, that decision deserves scrutiny, not accusations. Scrutiny. What do you think? Is the emotional response people have to seeing someone other than Diana wear Diana's pieces rational? Or is it a form of grief that prevents any nuanced assessment of practical reality? I genuinely want to know what you think. Drop it in the comments. William and Harry's different approaches. Here's something fascinating that doesn't get discussed nearly enough in this context. William and Harry have handled their mother's jewelry legacy in profoundly different ways. And those differences tell us something important about how each of them has processed their mother's death, their relationship with the institution that both shaped and failed her, and their vision of what Diana's legacy should mean. William, as we mentioned, gave Diana's engagement ring to Kate. That was a deeply public, deeply symbolic act of continuity, placing Diana's most famous piece of jewelry on the finger of the woman who would eventually become the next Queen Consort of England. It was, in a sense, bringing Diana's jewelry fully back into the official royal narrative. Harry's approach has been different. In Spare and in various interviews, Harry has spoken about Diana's jewelry with an almost fierce possessiveness, not in a greedy sense, but in the sense of someone trying to hold on to something that he feels has been repeatedly taken, claimed or absorbed by an institution he no longer trusts. Harry gave Meghan a ring featuring 2 diamonds from Diana's collection, flanking a center stone from Botswana. That ring, a private, personal piece, not a crown jewel, not a public statement, represents something very different from William's public gesture with the engagement ring. Harry was saying, "This is ours, this is private, this is not for the institution, this is for my family." And when you understand that dynamic, when you understand that Harry has spent years feeling that the institution took from him repeatedly, including in ways he connects to his mother's treatment and her death, then the questions about Diana's jewelry don't feel like idle curiosity anymore. They feel like they matter, because for Harry, for William, for anyone who loved Diana, every piece of her jewelry that isn't fully and transparently accounted for is a loose thread in the story of what happened to her. And we all know what it feels like to have loose threads in a story you can never fully close. What the experts say now. Let me bring in some contemporary expert opinion, because the conversation around royal jewelry accountability has actually evolved significantly in the past 5 years. Several factors have driven this. First, there's been a broader cultural reckoning with the opacity of royal finances and assets, the Crown Estate, the Duchy of Cornwall, the private estates of senior royals. All of these have come under increased scrutiny, particularly following the departure of Harry and Meghan and the wave of royal documentaries and memoirs that followed. Second, there's been a genuine scholarly push for greater transparency about the provenance and current location of significant historical objects held by the royal family. This isn't conspiracy-driven. It's the same academic impulse that has pushed for greater transparency about colonial-era acquisitions in museum collections. Objects with complex histories deserve documented, transparent chains of custody. Third, and perhaps most significantly, several pieces of Diana's jewelry have appeared at auction in recent years, sourced from individuals who claim to have received them legitimately, and those auction appearances have raised fresh questions about provenance. A former lady-in-waiting sold several pieces in 2017, claiming they were gifts from Diana. A charity auction in 2019 featured pieces that Diana's former staff members said they had received as personal gifts. Each of these sales generated both headlines and questions. Were these genuinely Diana's gifts? Were they properly documented? Did Diana's estate, and specifically her sons, have any claim on them? Dr. Anna Kie, a historian who has written extensively on royal material culture, noted in a 2021 lecture that the post-Diana jewelry dispersal represents one of the most significant unresolved questions in recent royal material history. She was careful to say she was not alleging wrongdoing, but she was emphatic that the question deserved serious scholarly attention. And then there's the work being done by independent royal historians who have spent years cross-referencing Diana's jewelry appearances and photographs with the official accounts of what went where. Their findings, and I want to be precise about this, are not that the jewelry was stolen. Their findings are that the public record has gaps, that pieces which appear in Diana's personal photographs do not appear in any publicly documented inventory of what was bequeathed to her sons or returned to the crown. Gaps, not accusations, gaps. But in a monarchy that asks for public trust, and in the legacy of a woman who was herself a victim of institutional opacity and secrecy, those gaps are not a minor administrative footnote. They are a failure of accountability. The bigger picture, what this really means. I want to zoom out for a moment because we've been deep in the details of specific pieces and specific accounts, and it's easy to lose the forest for the trees. The reason this story matters, the reason it continues to generate heat and outrage and obsessive online discussion nearly 3 decades after Diana's death, is not really about jewelry. It's about power and accountability and the way institutions protect themselves. Diana Spencer married into the most powerful family in Britain at the age of 19. She was, by her own account, and by the accounts of everyone who knew her in those years, completely unprepared for what awaited her. A young woman of remarkable warmth and emotional intelligence, dropped into a machinery of protocol and institutional interest and dynastic calculation that had been running for centuries before she arrived and would continue running long after she left. She fought it. She found her own power in the photographs, in the handshakes, in the personal connection she made with ordinary people. She learned to play the media game better than the institution that had trapped her in it. And then she was gone, and the institution, as institutions do, absorbed the shock, recalibrated, and continued. Diana's jewelry, the physical objects that she wore, that she chose, that she used to tell a story about herself at every public appearance, became, after her death, pawns in a game she was no longer alive to play. The Crown claimed back what was Crown property. Her executors distributed what they could document. And in the spaces between those two processes, in the gray zones of gift jewelry and personal collections and incomplete inventories, things moved. Maybe always legitimately, maybe not always. But here's the thing, we don't know, and we should. William and Harry deserve to know exactly what their mother had. The public, which invested so deeply in Diana, deserves transparency about what happened to her legacy. And Diana herself, the woman who said she wanted to be a queen of people's hearts, deserves to have her story told completely and honestly. Even the parts the institution would prefer remained obscure. The questions that remain. Before we get to the conclusion, I want to lay out very clearly the specific questions that remain unanswered, because I think it's important to be precise about what we know, what we suspect, and what we simply don't know. Question 1. What was the complete inventory of Diana's personal jewelry collection at the time of her death? This has never been made public. Diana's will was partially sealed, and the jewelry provisions were not fully disclosed. Question 2. What was the process by which that inventory was conducted? Who oversaw it? Were Diana's executors present for the entire process, Or were there periods when the household office had access without executors present? Question 3. Which specific pieces were classified as crown property and returned to the royal collection? And on what basis were those classifications made? Were Diana's sons, her legal heirs, consulted about or informed of those classifications? Question 4. Of the pieces identified as Diana's personal property, were all of them received by her estate and subsequently distributed to her heirs as documented in her will? Question 5. For pieces that were distributed as gifts to staff or others by Diana before her death, was that distribution properly documented and disclosed to her executors? Question 6. Are there pieces in the current possession of members of the royal family that were Diana's personal property, the transfer of which has never been publicly documented? These are not outrageous questions. These are the questions any reasonable person would ask about the estate of any private individual. The fact that they remain unanswered in the case of one of the most significant public figures of the 20th century is, itself, a story. We began this story with a woman in a tiara, but we end it with something much more important, the question of what we owe to the memory of people who shaped our world. Diana didn't just wear jewelry. She used it to communicate. Every piece she chose was a statement, sometimes defiant, sometimes tender, sometimes strategically brilliant. The sapphire engagement ring she wore even after the divorce, a deliberate visual reminder of what Charles had thrown away. The simple pearl earrings at the last photographs taken of her. The Spencer family pieces she wore when she wanted to assert an identity apart from the crown. Those objects carry meaning, and the people who loved her, including, perhaps most importantly, her own sons, deserve to know where those objects are and how they got there. This is not a call for accusations. It's not a witch hunt against Camilla or anyone else. It is a call for transparency, for a public inventory, for the kind of accountability that Diana herself, with her radical commitment to honest storytelling even when it was inconvenient, would have demanded. She spent the last years of her life fighting institutions that operated in secrecy and served their own interests at the expense of the people caught inside them. The least we can do, in her memory, is keep asking questions. And so I'll leave you with this. If the royal household tomorrow released a complete, publicly verified inventory of Diana's personal jewelry collection, where each piece came from, where it went, who authorized each transfer, and where it is today, do you think that inventory would answer every question? Or do you think there would still be pieces that couldn't be fully accounted for? Leave your answer in the comments. Share this video with someone who cares about Diana's legacy. And if you want to go deeper on the specific pieces, the specific photographs, the specific expert analyses, I have a follow-up video coming that gets into the visual evidence in detail. Because Diana's story isn't over. It never really will be.